know it's going to take time. We wished it'd be faster, but we have to be patient.
I know for 100% they won't find anything. Well, I'm actually pretty happy about that because it's been about 3 months. I've been asking for them, and it's just been delayed.
In the latest chapter of the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case, stepfather Daniel Martell made a statement that stunned viewers across Canada. In a CBC interview, he declared with absolute certainty that cadaver dogs, brought in to search for human remains, will not find anything. His words echo like a challenge, not only to investigators, but also to the public who have followed this mystery for months. How can a man be so sure of the outcome before the search even begins? Is this the voice of an innocent parent figure desperate to clear his name, or the kind of denial that only deepens suspicion? Tonight, we break down Daniel's bold claim, what it means for the investigation, and why cadaver dogs may hold the key to exposing the truth. When the interviewer asked Daniel Martell about the cadaver dogs, his response was immediate, almost rehearsed. "I know for 100% they won't find anything." That single line sent ripples across the investigation and the online community. It was not just the words themselves, but the absolute certainty behind them. In a case where so much remains unknown, where even investigators hesitate to speak in absolutes, Daniel's unwavering confidence stands out. To understand why this is so controversial, we need to consider what cadaver dogs actually represent. These highly trained animals are not ordinary search dogs. Their entire purpose is to detect the scent of human remains, even long after decomposition has begun. They are capable of locating trace evidence buried beneath soil, hidden under water, or masked by vegetation. In fact, cadaver dogs have been instrumental in solving countless cases worldwide, often finding evidence that technology, helicopters, and even massive search teams missed. So when Daniel says he knows they will find nothing, it immediately raises a fundamental question. How could he possibly know that? An innocent stepfather might hope nothing is found, because discovery would mean tragedy. He might believe the search will come up empty, because months of other searches already have. But to claim knowledge, 100% certainty, before the dogs even step onto the property is unusual. It shifts the conversation from grief and hope into something that sounds like control. During the interview, Daniel frames the arrival of the dogs as something he personally requested. He stresses that he has been asking for cadaver dogs for months, and that he is pretty happy RCMP is finally using them. At first glance, this could sound like cooperation, the plea of a man desperate for every possible tool to clear his family's name. But the way Daniel phrases it, highlighting that the search was delayed, that he had to push for it, casts him almost as the driving force behind the deployment. He presents it not as an investigative step, but as a box being checked. One more confirmation of what he insists is already obvious. There is nothing to find. And this is where the tension lies. By preemptively announcing the outcome, Daniel is not just defending himself, he is shaping expectations. If the cadaver dogs come back with no alerts, he can point to this moment and say, "See? I told you." But if the dogs indicate something, his statement will look far more troubling. It will appear less like confidence and more like foreknowledge, as if he already knew what would or wouldn't be found. In either case, Daniel has tied his credibility to the results of the search. What makes this even more striking is how quickly he repeats himself. When the interviewer circles back and asks again what he expects from the dogs, Daniel doubles down. "I know for 100% they won't find anything." That's probably why they waited this long, to show the public they're working. It is not just a claim of innocence, it is a claim that the search itself is theater, a performance for the public eye. He reduces a major investigative step to a gesture, something designed to calm speculation rather than uncover truth. This framing is powerful, but also dangerous. On one level, it resonates with his frustration. For months, Daniel has been the target of online rumors, theories, and accusations. By his account, social media has become a circus, picking apart his every move. His declaration that the cadaver dogs will find nothing could be seen as his way of pushing back, an attempt to slam the door on speculation. But the very strength of that pushback only fuels more questions. Why is he so certain? Why does he dismiss the dogs as merely symbolic, rather than as potentially decisive? To many viewers, the statement feels off. Parents and step-parents in similar situations often speak in terms of emotion, their heartbreak, their desperation, their prayers for answers. Daniel, in contrast, speaks in absolutes, statistics, and certainty. He does not plead for the dogs to prove his children are alive. He insists the dogs will fail, and that their failure will vindicate him. That difference in tone, between hope and certainty, between grief and control, is why his words have sparked so much debate. At the end of part 1, we are left with this central paradox. Daniel Martell presents himself as a man confident in his innocence, welcoming every tool the RCMP can deploy. Yet his certainty about the outcome of the cadaver dog search feels less like innocence and more like foresight. And in a case where 2 children remain missing, foresight can be a dangerous thing. One of the most curious aspects of Daniel Martell's interview is not just what he says, but how he says it. When most parents or guardians of missing children speak publicly, they tend to focus on emotion, memories of their loved ones, hopes for their safe return, grief over their absence. Daniel, however, often shifts the conversation toward numbers, technologies, and investigative logistics. He sounds less like a grieving stepfather and more like a commentator tracking the RCMP's every move. Listen closely to his words. There were 70,000 drone photos reviewed. They used ATVS, Argos, side-by-sides. They scanned the whole area and found a beaver and a coyote. That's all. These are not vague impressions. They are precise figures and specific details, the kind you would expect from an investigator summarizing a report, not from a stepfather under enormous emotional strain. His familiarity with the process is striking. He even estimates how long it would take cadaver dogs to search the entire 8.5 acres surrounding the property, suggesting probably a couple of weeks. Why does this matter? Because language reveals mindset. Daniel is not merely answering questions, he is constructing a narrative. By listing statistics and technologies, he paints a picture of thoroughness, the idea that RCMP has already done everything humanly possible. And by emphasizing that nothing was found, he reinforces the conclusion he wants the public to reach. There is nothing to be found. His goal seems to be not only to defend himself, but to shut down speculation altogether. But herein lies the problem. The more he insists on nothingness, the less convincing he becomes. Criminologists often warn about the phenomenon of over-explaining. When someone volunteers details that were not asked or repeats points excessively, it can signal insecurity rather than confidence. Daniel wasn't asked to recall the exact number of drone photos. He wasn't asked about which animals were detected by scanning equipment. Yet he brings them up as though rehearsed, repeating them until they sound like mantras. To skeptics, this feels less like transparency and more like persuasion. Another telling moment is his emphasis on polygraphs. Daniel points out multiple times that he, Malehya, and his mother all passed lie detector tests. He even suggests doing another round, but this time with new examiners. On the surface, this seems like eagerness to cooperate, but underneath, it raises questions. Innocent people often believe that truth will emerge naturally, without repeated demonstrations. Guilty or insecure people, on the other hand, may cling to tests, certifications, or rituals, as if one proof is never enough. By insisting so strongly on the polygraph results, Daniel may inadvertently draw more attention to the very suspicion he wants to bury. There is also the matter of control. Daniel tells the interviewer that he has filled notebooks with details for the RCMP and that he tries to meet with investigators 3 times a week. He calls, he texts, he offers small leads. He presents himself as proactive, even indispensable. But this level of involvement raises a subtle question. Is he helping, or is he monitoring? By keeping himself so close to the investigation, he ensures he knows what the RCMP is doing, what they are looking for, and perhaps, most importantly, what they are not finding. For someone desperate to manage public perception, that kind of closeness can be invaluable. Of course, there is another way to interpret his behavior. Perhaps Daniel is truly innocent, and his obsession with details is his way of coping. In the absence of answers, he clings to data. In the face of unbearable uncertainty, he finds comfort in statistics, timelines, and lists. This is not impossible. Grief manifests differently in different people. Yet even this interpretation leaves an impression of detachment. Numbers replace emotion, logistics replace memory, and the children themselves fade into the background. This detachment is why the public continues to question him. To many, Daniel does not sound like a stepfather mourning 2 missing kids. He sounds like a man building a case, brick by brick, hoping that if the wall is high enough, suspicion cannot climb over it. But walls built of words can crumble quickly when confronted with hard evidence. And as the cadaver dogs prepare to sweep the land, Daniel's statistics, numbers, and reassurances may soon meet a truth that cannot be managed. As the interview moves beyond the technicalities of the investigation, a different side of Daniel Martell begins to surface. Gone are the lists of technologies and numbers. Instead, he speaks about the toll this ordeal has taken on him. His words are heavy. "I'm not going to say I'm doing well, but I'm doing better than at the start. It's physically exhausting, mentally exhausting, emotionally exhausting." For a brief moment, the audience sees a man worn down by months of relentless pressure, someone who wakes up each day with the impossible task of carrying on without answers. But even in this glimpse of vulnerability, another pattern emerges. Daniel never lingers long on grief. Almost immediately, he shifts back to the language of resilience. Every day you wake up, it's a new day, new hope, and you just keep going forward. It is a line that could inspire sympathy, but to many viewers, it sounds rehearsed, like a mantra repeated often enough to become automatic. Genuine sorrow tends to be messy, unpredictable. Daniel's grief, by contrast, feels neat, packaged, controlled, another part of the story he is trying to manage. The most revealing shift comes when the topic turns to social media. Here, Daniel's composure cracks. He describes online speculation as a circus, bristling at how strangers analyze his every movement, every gesture, every facial expression. He complains about AI-generated images, about accusations that spiral out of control. His frustration is raw, his anger visible. Instead of focusing on Lilly and Jack, he focuses on himself, on how he is being perceived, on how unfair the scrutiny feels. In that moment, the spotlight drifts away from the missing children and lands squarely on Daniel's personal battle with public opinion. This defensiveness is important. For months, the investigation has unfolded under the glare of national attention. Daniel knows that his words will be picked apart, his tone dissected, his demeanor compared to what people expect from a grieving stepfather. His anger may be natural, a human response to relentless suspicion, but it also fuels doubt. To skeptics, his outburst looks less like frustration and more like fear. Fear that no matter what he says, the public will never believe him. Then comes the question that cuts to the core. Do you still think Lilly and Jack are alive? Daniel pauses, then answers. Yes, I hope so. That's all we have. Hope on the surface, it is a simple, almost heartbreaking statement. But in context, it clashes with everything else he has said. Just minutes earlier, Daniel declared with certainty that cadaver dogs would find nothing. Cadaver dogs are not trained to find the living. They search for human remains. To dismiss them so confidently while clinging to hope that the children are alive creates a paradox. How can he both deny the possibility of remains and yet avoid ruling out death entirely. This contradiction leaves viewers unsettled. If Daniel truly believes the children are alive, why not express relief that the dogs will confirm no remains exist? Why not welcome the search as a way to prove his hope is valid? Instead, his tone is defensive, almost combative, as if the dog's very presence is an accusation against him. Hope, in his telling, becomes less about Lilly and Jack and more about protecting his image. Equally striking is the absence of detail when Daniel talks about the children themselves. He mentions school buses passing by, the sadness of teachers and friends who miss them. But rarely does he describe the children in personal terms, their laughter, their favorite games, their personalities. His words about them are vague, generalized, almost abstract. To many viewers, this emotional distance is unsettling. It makes the hope he claims to hold feel hollow, as though the children are concepts in his narrative rather than living, breathing individuals he longs for. By the end of this portion of the interview, Daniel has revealed as much in his tone as in his words. He is exhausted, defensive, and determined to maintain control of the story. He clings to hope, but in a way that feels detached, even contradictory. He rails against social media for misrepresenting him, but in doing so, he reveals just how much weight he gives to perception. Above all, his words leave a haunting impression. A man caught between denial and despair, between certainty and vulnerability, between the role of grieving stepfather and the role of prime suspect in the public's imagination. One of the most telling aspects of Daniel Martell's interview is how much he tries to own the narrative. He is not content to sit back and let RCMP or the media frame the search. Instead, he positions himself at the center of it. He reminds the audience that he asked for cadaver dogs months ago, subtly implying that their deployment now is not the investigator's decision alone, but the result of his persistence. In his framing, if nothing is found, it validates him, his patience, his demands. He wants the public to see him as proactive, as someone pushing for answers while everyone else lags behind. But in doing so, Daniel has made a gamble. By tying his credibility to the outcome of the cadaver dog search, he raises the stakes to dangerous levels. If the dogs find nothing, he will claim foresight, pointing to his words as proof that he knew all along. But if the dogs detect anything, no matter how small, his certainty collapses. What once sounded like confidence will suddenly look like knowledge, and knowledge in this case would be damning. This is what makes his rhetoric so risky. Innocent people may speak with conviction, but rarely in absolutes. They leave room for uncertainty because they know that investigations are unpredictable. Daniel, however, refuses to leave that space. He does not say, "I don't think they'll find anything." He does not say, "I hope they won't." He says, "I know," over and over again. That absolute language may be comforting to him, but to the outside world, it sounds unnatural. The control extends beyond his words about the dogs. Daniel repeatedly emphasizes his involvement with RCMP, filling notebooks with details, calling and texting investigators, trying to meet with them 3 times a week. On the surface, this paints him as cooperative. But there is another way to view it, as a way to monitor the investigation, to stay one step ahead of what the police know, and to shape the story before it reaches the public. It blurs the line between helping and managing, between cooperation and control. Even his treatment of social media fits this pattern. He complains that people analyze his every gesture, every expression. He mocks the use of AI-generated photos, calling it ridiculous. Yet by acknowledging it, by giving it airtime, he inadvertently shows how much it affects him. Instead of ignoring speculation, he is constantly responding to it, trying to redirect the narrative in his favor. It is as if his fight is not only to prove his innocence in the eyes of law enforcement, but to win the court of public opinion. This obsession with control can be read 2 ways. Perhaps Daniel is simply a man under siege, battered by months of suspicion, clinging to any way he can clear his name. Or perhaps he is a man who knows that the investigation is closing in, and his only defense is to get ahead of the story, to define it before the truth defines him. In either case, it shows how much importance he places on perception, how the public sees him, how RCMP views his cooperation, how social media interprets his every word. And then there is the broader symbolism of cadaver dogs themselves. For investigators, they are a tool. For the public, they are a symbol of truth, unbiased, unshakable, incorruptible. A cadaver dog does not care about perception. It does not read headlines or watch interviews. It reacts only to scent. By insisting so strongly that they will find nothing, Daniel is not just challenging an investigative tool, he is challenging the very idea of objective truth. If the dogs prove him right, he will feel vindicated. If they prove him wrong, no amount of words will save him. That is why his gamble feels so precarious. By trying to control the narrative, Daniel has made himself inseparable from the outcome of the search. When the dogs enter those woods, they will not just be sniffing for remains. They will be testing Daniel's certainty, his credibility, and perhaps even his innocence. And no amount of statistics, polygraph references, or frustration with social media will matter if the dogs uncover something that words cannot explain. As this interview makes clear, Daniel Martell has chosen his side of the story: certainty. He does not leave space for doubt, for possibility, or even for chance. He insists with absolute confidence that cadaver dogs, one of the most trusted tools in modern investigations, will not find a trace of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. To some, that confidence sounds like innocence. To others, it sounds like foreknowledge, the kind of statement that may one day be replayed in a very different light. The truth is, cadaver dogs are more than animals on a leash. They represent the line between speculation and evidence, between rumor and fact. They do not care about narratives or reputations. They cannot be persuaded by words or shaped by interviews. They respond only to the truth beneath the soil. And that is why this moment is so crucial. Because when the dogs finish their search, Daniel's words will either stand as vindication or collapse as the most suspicious claim he has ever made. For the families, for the community, and for all who still ask what happened to Lilly and Jack, the dogs may not provide closure, but they will provide clarity. And in a case clouded by speculation and contradiction, even a sliver of clarity can change everything. So we leave you with this question: is Daniel Martell the stepfather wrongly accused, defiantly standing against rumor? Or is his certainty the kind of denial that hides a darker truth? Subscribe to True Child Cases for the latest updates, deep investigations, and the untold stories behind Canada's most haunting mysteries. And let us know in the comments. What do you think Daniel's words really mean?